Hi, I'm John Maxwell. When the top companies in the world are looking for trainers, speakers, and coaches, there's one name that stands above the rest, and that's Maxwell Leadership. Our certified team members have gotten proven results for companies all over the globe, and our reputation, I'm proud to say, is second to none. Some of our members have risen to the top of their profession, including the one you're going to meet today. I proudly introduce you to my friend Bob Fabian Zinka.
Welcome to the Leadership and Success Podcast with your host, Coach BZ, where we help you lead with purpose and succeed with impact. If you're ready to grow into the kind of leader others want to follow, this podcast is for you. If you're determined to elevate your success and leave a lasting legacy, this podcast is for you. As my mentor, Dr. John C. Maxwell reminds us, everything rises and falls on leadership. Our goal is simple: to inspire you, challenge you, and equip you with insights that can transform the trajectory of your leadership journey. Welcome aboard to another episode of the Leadership and Success Podcast with Coach BZ.
I'm Mike Studeman here, retired two-star admiral and somebody who spent a number of years in the military and going around the world. Hey, I thought I would provide a little bit of advice on how to deal with surprises and curveballs. You won't be able to avoid them. They're coming your way, whether or not you like it or not. And so becoming accustomed, being prepared or as prepared as you can be for surprises is going to be really important. And so I'll tell you a quick story. I was in my second tour. I was a lieutenant junior grade, which is the second, ranking from the bottom. You're very, very junior. I think it was the Balkans War. I was stationed in Spain, and I was told to go down and brief a number of NATO submarines that were making ports of call in Gibraltar before they were going to go up into the Adriatic. At the time, the Balkans War was raging. There was a UN resolution that was designed to stop more armaments from flowing into the combat zone, and NATO was charged with supporting that with reconnaissance and interdiction operations. So anyway, I would drive down there, I would brief those submarines, and I enjoyed kind of getting on them and talking to the crews about what was happening in the Balkans, and in particular what was happening kind of along the coastal areas where they were going to be operating. Well, I got invited to a conference, and it turned out to be a highfalutin one with admirals and captains, unit commanders, and this was up in Den Helder in the Netherlands. This is north of Amsterdam, right there on the North Sea. So I was up there and was expecting to sort of be in support of maybe my Navy captain, senior officer, and was in the back of the room when this briefing conference began. I was interested to see who the speakers were, and it was going to start out with a three-star admiral who was in charge of the Dutch Navy, and was way in the back. It was like a big Quonset hut, nice, long, elongated building with rows and rows and rows of seating arrangements for all the other attendees, and I was way in the back. And then all of a sudden, in the introductory remarks, the three-star admiral said something to the effect of, and we've heard about some of the Balkan situation from Lieutenant Studeman, Lieutenant Junior Grade Studeman. We'd like him to come forward and provide us with a situational update for the crowd. And I couldn't believe my ears. I'm in the back. It was the longest walk up to the
All right, everybody, this is Coach BZ, and that was just an extract of our guest today. That's going to be Admiral Mike Studeman. I am so privileged and honored to have him here. But I'm being reminded before we bring him on board, our moment of gratitude. This is where we take a moment every single time we meet to just take a moment and be grateful. And part of the reason why we do this, for those who've been watching the show for a while, is because in the military right now, it's about 21 service member and veteran who commit suicide, not every year, not every month, but every single day. And I believe it's not possible to be suicidal and be grateful at the very same time. So you know the drill. If you can just take one quick second and put yourself in your happy place, maybe close your eyes and think about one thing you are grateful for right now. And I know since Juneteenth, I've been grateful for freedom because I feel like we were created to be free, right? Pat Henry, one of our founding fathers, says, "Give me liberty or give me death." Meaning I'd rather die than be a slave to somebody else, right? I was born to be free, and America is the freest country in the world, right? The home of the brave, the land of the free, and I'm very grateful for that freedom. Part of the reason why I joined the Navy was to ensure that we still have that freedom and also to export that around the world. But anyway, let us know in the comment, where are you guys joining us from? What city, what state? And if you are outside of the US, since we are a global show now, which country as well? I must say most of our American citizens are pretty much challenged with geography this day. So let us know also what you are grateful for. And of course, if you have a question for the Admiral, type it in the comment. We're going to try to get to as many questions as possible. And I want to say hello to Daniel Young, a very active member of our community, joining us from Maitland, Florida. I think that's not too far from Orlando. All right, so let me see if I can properly introduce the Admiral before we bring him on board. So Rear Admiral Mike Studeman retired now after an extraordinary 35-year career as one of America's foremost national security and intelligence leader. He completed this distinguished service as commander of the Office of Naval Intelligence, while at the same time serving as director of the National Maritime Intelligence Integration Office and the director of National Intelligence Manager for Maritime Affairs. Wow. Earlier, he served as director of intelligence on J2 for both the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, I think it's just PACOM now, and also U.S. Sovereign Command, commanded intelligence operations supporting U.S. Cyber Command, and was appointed by President George W. Bush. Actually, that's the one I commissioned under. By President Bush as White House Fellow. And today, he continues serving as an author, speaker, strategic advisor, and one of the nation's leading experts on China, the Indo-Pacific and leadership. So our conversation today will also explore Admiral Studeman's outstanding best-selling book, Might of the Chen. I want to make sure we spend a segment on that, Forging Leaders of Iron Integrity, and why character, trust, humility, and integrity remain the foundation of exceptional leadership in every profession. So part of what you're going to be learning today is why character is a leader's greatest strategic advantage, but also the legacy of Admiral Studeman hopes to leave for the next generation of leaders. So without any further ado, please help me welcome to the Leadership and Success Podcast, ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Admiral Mike Studeman.
Hey, BZ, how are you doing?
Admiral, I can hear you, but I cannot see you. Let me see. You must be using a Mac. Let me make sure that you get your FaceTime and not your iPhone camera on. Yeah, this only. Oh, here we go. Yay! I can see you. Good afternoon, sir.
How you doing, BZ? Good to see you.
Great honor and privilege to have you on board, sir. I'd like to start with anything you are grateful for this day.
I'm grateful for the growing courage of American citizens that see what's wrong in their local communities, their states, their federal government, and who are willing to take action to be able to improve, the condition of those around them. To me, I think that's something that is growing in strength. It's been overdue, and I'm grateful that I now see it in more manifest ways.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, sir. And the other question I also like to ask, is there something about you, sir, that most people may not know when they first meet you? I know you are a legend and I think a myth in American national security circle, but just as a man, maybe a superpower or something most people may not know about the man.
Well, I now keep bees, one of my hobbies. And so I harvested over 200 pounds of honey just in the last 3 months. And so I've got that. I'm going to take it to the church and sell it there. And all the profits will go to an Appalachian Service project. But I also make a honey liqueur called Krupnikas, which is a die for. It's like nectar of the gods. It's awesome.
That is amazing. And by the way, my sea daddy, now retired Captain Joe Rothschild, is joining us from Lake Arrowhead, California, close to San Diego. I didn't think he was going to be able to make it. I know for sure he's going to have a question for you, sir. He's an IP officer just like me. All right, let's see if we can get started. We do have a lot of questions for you, a lot of interest from the audience, but maybe, sir, just to get things rolling, uh, first, welcome to the Leadership and Success podcast. It's really an absolute honor to have you here, sir. But I guess one of the first question we have for you is, before we dive into leadership, China, the great power competition, and all of that, I'd like to begin with something more personal. I just found out this week that your father, Admiral, four-star Admiral William O. Studeman, is one of the most respected intelligence leaders in American history, serving as Director of Naval Intelligence, Director of NSA, Deputy Director of the CIA. And you just explained to me in the green room, it's not just the CIA, but really, I think most of the intelligence, right, organization in the U.S. and acting Director of the Central Agency. What was it like growing up in a household where intelligence, leadership, and service to country were simply part of everyday life?
Yeah, thanks, BZ. I'm really proud of him, and he taught me a lot by example. And I will tell you that he had some of the hardest positions that you can probably take in the government at very significant times. The end of the Cold War, for example, and then a post-war environment when he was director of NSA. And so, yeah, a great model for me growing up. But what I remember, because it just seems normal to just encounter that, to not have it would have been abnormal. To see somebody like dedicated to their country, working long hours, like dealing with global international issues. What I found is I was in college when he was in some of his senior positions, and then I actually joined the Navy when he was still active duty when he was a four-star. But he would have these parties, and I would always end up with, the scut jobs of, taking drinks when people were done with them at holiday parties or whatever. I was back from college for those. And these people all had like grand titles. I mean, they were admirals and generals and senior executive service, schmuckatelli, whatever. But to me, they were just like human beings, and they made bad jokes, or, they were a little like socially awkward in some places. And so I learned very quickly that not to be intimidated by titles and ranks and positions, that ultimately these are just, people trying to do their very best. And so I always understood sort of the internal human side of this. And I was never flustered by very senior people. To me, they were always just humans that happened to have, a rank or station attached to the end of their name.
Well, that is amazing. One of my mentors told me, everybody puts on their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. But I must say, when I was a seaman recruit, E1, which is the lowest rank in the military at boot camp, I felt like any flag officer was like a demigod or something. And I want to say, growing up in the household of an admiral, did you feel pressure to become a flag officer as well growing up?
Oh, no, he didn't. He never pressured me at all. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was a junior in college. I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I was studying government and history, but I read this book called Flight of the Intruder by Stephen Kuntz about some rogue naval aviation aviators flying A6s in Vietnam. And I'm like, I'd like to be the side seat. My eyes are too bad to be a pilot. I'd love to be like a navigator, bombardier navigator. And that's the reason why I joined the Navy, because I wanted to experience naval aviation. Remember Top Gun had come out in 85 too. Yeah. And there's this whole like passion for flying, and I've always enjoyed it. And no kidding, I joined the Navy, and then I was good enough in my basic intel class to get full rights to the first, billets that were offered. And one was an A6 squadron. And as soon as I, turned around, next I was qualifying to fly, and I'm launching off aircraft carriers as the intel that they wanted to make puke in the cockpit.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. I think Top Gun probably got more people enlisted in the Navy than any other thing in our history.
Probably.
It's amazing. Actually, I really love the uniform so much. I'm kind of not too proud to admit it, but part of the reason why I chose the Navy as opposed to the other branches of the military after 9/11 was because of the uniform. I just love the Navy uniform so much. But anyway, is there maybe one lesson, sir, that your father taught you that kind of stayed with you throughout your own Navy career?
Well, I mean, the golden rule is always sort of what he demonstrated in all of his interactions, even when the disparity of rank or station was so, extreme, whether it was the janitors or it was secretaries or whatever, the way he talked about them, the way he talked about, his most interesting story might be somebody that's well down on the totem pole there. So that kind of stuck with me, the whole idea of being decent and kind, to people, actually showing that that they exist, that you care enough to learn a little bit about them, and understand that everybody is a cog in a wheel ultimately, and that they all have self-worth that you should feed in certain ways. So that was always there. From a professional standpoint, I always heard him talking about deep penetration of our adversaries, and then deep penetration of blue friendly things too, to understand exactly what planners and operators were thinking about. And so this idea of how do you insinuate yourself to really understand things that enemies don't want you to know about, but also how do you actually be so close to the people you're supporting that you're cohabitating with them in weapon systems, aircraft carriers or airplane cockpits or ships or whatever, and get to know what they really need. What are the requirements? How are they thinking about a problem? And when you know that intimately, you can provide better intelligence support to them.
So true. I guess in the information warfare community, which we both belong to, we always teach. I think we stole it from the Army, but mission first, people always. But I guess when you really care for your people, that's really the best way to lead, isn't it? And so you ultimately became yourself commander of the Office of Naval Intelligence, just like your father. So I know he didn't pressure you to get into the Navy, become a commissioned officer. However, as you became an intel officer, just like your father, did you ever feel the pressure to live up to his legendary, remarkable legacy? Or did he simply encourage you to become your own kind of a leader?
Yeah, thanks, BZ. Not really, because first of all, I didn't ever expect to follow in those sort of vaunted footsteps up a golden staircase. I joined for another reason, and frankly, I satisfied all my goals that I wanted in the Navy in my first tour. I mean, we had a war, Desert Storm, and that matured me greatly. But I also learned to like analysis when I was sent to my second duty station in Rota, Spain. And that hook of analysis and research and briefing and all the rest related to the Balkans War kept me in. I really found a passion for the work. And so that was what transformed. But I always wanted to hide the fact, and maybe I was immature, but I didn't want to admit who my father was because I wanted to be judged based on my own merit. I didn't want to help in hand. I did not want him to interfere. I did not want any influence. And I purposely hid, the fact that I was the son of. Wanted to make my own way. And so that was kind of my feeling of the matter for a long time.
That is really, really amazing. Actually, maybe that's part of the reason my father was Robert Zenga. I am Bob, but I didn't really use Bob until I came to college, especially after I became a father. I used to go by my middle name, Fabian, just to distinguish myself from my dad. But it is really amazing. So one last question I'm going to ask about your legendary father, Admiral. If your father were watching this interview today, what do you hope he'd be most proud of? Not about the position you held or the rank you've achieved, but about the man and the leader you have become?
That's a good question. And I sense that what he would, maybe provide some positive, constructive remarks about is the balance that I struck with my family. I took very, very hard jobs, but not always. In fact, when my family, clearly we couldn't move different places. My sons were in different places of schooling and all the rest. And I made some really hard decisions professionally to prioritize family. And for many people, those would have been fatal. So I had a lot of luck along the way. And so actually turning down 3 numbered fleet and 2 jobs was not necessarily career enhancing. But I felt strongly about command. I felt strongly about not separating myself and going to Fifth Fleet from the United States at a critical time in my family's life. And I think my dad recognized that and realized that what I was trying to do was to actually strike the balance, even though it's teeter-tottering all the time, that I was spending more energy and willing to sacrifice my professional goals to be able to ensure that I walked through life in a way that was suitable to the people that I surrounded my life with.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing, sir. Now, in this next segment, we're going to be talking about your leadership journey. Looking back over your remarkable career, what leadership principle has become more important to you today than when you first became an officer, an ensign?
Well, I think the main part of my book, when I talk about linking with others and creating a team and then being able to do the heavy lifting, that to me is a reflection of my maturity. Because when I came in, like many young people, very gung-ho, like I'm going to solve this, I'm going to go have, these successes and, I'll make a difference here on my own. And I learned gradually that really the greatest successes were those when you could share it with other people and that they were also the ones responsible for those successes. So I grew to understand the true value of the team. Remember that African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go with others?
Yes.
That's exactly what, I slowly had this sort of awakening, and I became far more ecumenical. I became far more giving of others instead of seeing my fellow officers as competitors, right, for fitness reports and all the rest.
Yes.
It was like, how do I feed them? How do I help them become, the best at what they're doing? How do I share this? And where before I might harbor some, information or maybe not, try to share thoughts about how I thought things could creatively be solved.
Yes.
I gradually realized, no, that's actually the recipe, the ingredient for like collective success. And that to me has been something that I wanted to share with others who are younger now, so they don't have to go through as lengthy a process of getting that epiphany.
Wow, that is very powerful. And who were some of your mentors, sir, people who most influenced your leadership philosophy?
Well, my mentors were people I read about in books. I frankly, maybe because I was too self-reliant and independent and that way for my early ranks, I didn't go out and seek mentorship relationships. I thought they were suspect. I thought that would be like trying to cheat the system by like trying to grab a senior officer and maybe download whatever advice they had. And so I'm like, no, I'm gonna learn as much as I can. I'm gonna watch people through example. But one of the reasons why I wrote this book, honestly, BZ, is because I didn't have a mentor for the longest time. I mean, almost throughout my entire career, the mentors that I have, most of them were not, the few that I have, like they're not naval intelligence people. They were people that came into my life elsewhere. I describe in the book about the Navy postgraduate school. There's an old professor who knew Asia, been captured by the Japanese in World War II. And he was a mentor, but I never like formally established that. I never used the word to say, will you be my mentor? And what I realized, because I ached for the senior officers when I was young to just share a tidbit or two about, hey, what do you know? Can you throw a bone to, people that are, early in their career? And they were like, mission. Like, we're going to just like drive forward. But it was never the coaching and mentoring that I thought they should be spending time doing. And then I vowed when I was a very young officer, I'm like, no matter what, this is like a life dedication, no matter what, if I ever get so lucky as to be a senior officer, I'm going to spend time, on a carve out dedicated time to giving back to others and doing something additive to mission
that can
Yes.
help people grow and maybe be better than ever than any other, officer up to that point. But it takes sort of dedicated energy. And part of writing the book was to be able to say, this is a way of compiling what I know and also handing it back and sort of being like a capstone pass down from a career in the military and saying, look, this is the right time to package it and then leave it out in the open for anybody to learn from it.
That is really powerful, sir. Two quick follow-up. One, if you are a division officer, even a department head, I think that's pretty easy. But how do you scale that when you become the commander of ONI? That's like tens of thousands of people under you. How are you able to mentor the people at scale, in such a position?
Well, what I chose to do, and I did this starting when I was in my first command as a captain, when I had 900 people, I had mainly civilians that were older and very junior enlisted. This is an IP, it's Intel IP command,
Yes.
information professional, because it was an IT, it was monitoring, managing global JWICS capability for the Navy. And so I had people spread all over. I had 900 of them. That was a lot. And I had a very small wardroom. And I began to say, look, the only way that I can do this, other than the normal interfaces that I do during the battle or the day, is to actually write short notes that I think will be readable, digestible for busy people. And I would write 3 or 4 paragraphs on a leadership trait. And I would do this every 2 weeks. And I would title it and I would send it out, hoping to generate conversations within divisions about, what the captain, the commanding officer had talked about, trying to get sort of a virtuous cycle going. Like if you talk about ethics, if the commanding officer brings it up, then, which most people shy away from, by the way, talking about character and accountability and ethics and, counseling and reinforcing discipline, all these really hard issues, we tend to sort of crowd out.
Yes.
And I tackled them head on and I would send those things out. And so ultimately I had a lot of different leaders. I call them minutes because I hope they would read them in less than a minute.
I love that. Wow.
So my leadership minutes, I continued to do, beyond my commands when I was in staff positions all the way through to my final job in the Office of Naval.
That is really, really powerful. Actually, one of my mentors wasn't even in the Navy, Air Force. He was a colonel. He did just what you said. I found him. I can't remember where I was assigned to, just by accident. But I kept in touch with him, and he kept sending me those. And it really could be life-changing, literally. Because when you command, especially when you write the plan of the month or plan of the day, your people have to read every single word. And some commanding officer, they write novels, 500-600 pages. I'm like, what in the world? I have to read every single word. Why don't you just keep it pertinent to what we need to know right now, and allow your people to spend time doing whatever it is they need to do. So that's very much appreciated. Another thing you mentioned, Sarah, is you were mentored by books. That's exactly what happened to me. I've read probably close to 3,000 books now. Most of my mentors, even those I ended up meeting in person, like General Colin Powell, I first met him by reading his books. Can you tell us a couple of books that really made a difference for you, sir?
Well, I mean, I've got my entire bookshelf here, and all of them are cherished children. So you're asking me to choose a favorite. But
just a couple.
I think you're right. My American Journey, Colin Powell, that was influential for me, and learning his Powell's rules and how he led. And so that was useful. Stephen Covey's, the 7 Habits, 8 Habit, trust, all the rest, and the Sun, what they write is really good. And look, my grounding was in, books by Kipling and, a Hornblower series with, C.S. Forster and stuff. I mean, I read widely, so it wasn't just about sort of the conceptual nature of leadership. It was about fiction that also highlighted people in very tough conditions and how they would rise above. What kind of personality traits kind of did the job. And you can read endurance and learn about the whole Antarctica extremist situation. or Shackleton, got his people back. I mean, all of these different things
That's
should
powerful.
flow into a reading list. I would also recommend one of the really good books that I read. That's a good one from Scott Stalker. But
Yes.
Josh Kerr wrote Legacy, and it was what the All Blacks can teach us about
Thank you, sir.
leadership. Yeah, and you know what? That one it's a very small book,
Yes.
very fun read, and so it's got sports in there, and
Wow,
it
that's
also
amazing.
compacts a lot of good lessons in a very small little, tasty book. So I really
Wow.
like Legacy.
That's really amazing, because last year it was May. We started with 4 books only. Whenever people mention or recommend a book, we add them to our digital bookshelf. We have now over 600 books. So everything you've mentioned, sir, I'm going to make sure to add it. And by the way, when I do research on my guest, I like pictures of you, whether it's on LinkedIn, social media, or wherever it is, with your library or bookshelf. I take pictures of those, and then I find out which books are on your shelf, and then I look them up. But anyway, it's something I love to do. Thank you so much for sharing.
You want a closer look? Hold on a second. I'll just
Wow.
there's my
Screenshot.
bookshelf.
Thank you, sir. This
Yeah.
is amazing.
I read a
Now,
few of them too.
Before we go to the next section, I do need to ask you this, because for not just intelligence, but information warfare officer, regardless of the designator, I think this is true. Rarely do we have perfect information, right? How do great leaders make sound decisions amid ambiguity and uncertainty?
Yeah, I think let's just kind of rewind to Colin Powell in the way that he described his requirements for his intelligence professionals, to say, look, tell me what you know, tell me what you don't know, tell me what you think, and always distinguish the three, right? That's really good guidance to say, where does my knowledge start to fray? Where do I go into, I'm going to have to assess and evaluate based on experience, instinct, knowledge of the target, et cetera, but I don't have sources that say this is confirmed. And then, you do some prognostication. You can say if thens, like if this happens and the most likely is this, the probability is high, low, or medium. So I do think there's tradecraft that we are set up to be able to handle those kinds of situations. And there are plenty that have really low information, particularly early on. And then for an intel guy, your charge is to learn more. You're going off trying to figure out, how do I get other, whether you're satellites or whether it's other kind of sources, even open source, of course, there's more knowledge there than we can even harness. But all of those things, you have to be the activator of the ways that you'll learn more, get priority and go, I'm going to hammer with technical means, or I'm going to get an ISR asset, an aircraft, or I'm going to do a ship and move the ship, or I'm going to move a submarine, right? Those are all the things that are expected of an intel officer, never to be content with the level of knowledge that you have at a given moment. You're always trying to crack the case, learn more, get the insights, and then contribute to an informed decision by a senior leader.
Powerful. So now let's talk about your book. That's definitely one segment we cannot miss today. We need to talk about this best-selling book, Might of the Chain, right? Forging Leaders of Iron Integrity. I guess the first question, sir, is why did this book have to be written? Why did you write?
Well, I looked at America when I retired 3 years ago, and I said, you got to be kidding me. I see failures of basic leadership principles. I don't care if you're in the media, if you're in law firms, you're in academia or the business world, or in especially politics. It was sickening to my stomach to see, America suffering from poor leadership. And I thought, look, this is an important thing to do as a citizen, to contribute, to remind people how to be brilliant in the basics and get back to what actually constitutes ethical, honorable, effective leadership, right? Based on all things makes leadership go. And the fact that we have a country that's at each other's throats, that's more polarized than ever, demonstrates, underscores that all the evidence you need that we don't have enough leaders doing the right thing to be able to mitigate disagreements and the impact of those disagreements. There's a lot of things you can do you can disagree all you want.
Yes.
How you do that with dignity and respect and saving people's face really does matter. And those are things that are incorporated in sort of the basic leadership approaches that you and I were taught a long time ago.
Yes.
And it seemed to be escaping our country. And so I thought, well, look, if I'm supposed to rest after I did 35 years, but that's BS. I'm going to get to work and I'm going to create something that can add as a positive, constructive voice to these debates about how our nation needs to go forward with an intent to try to get to younger people in particular, because the older are showing that they're hardwired for failure. Like you can't get them out of their ways. And so I wanted to really influence the up and comers from teens, 20s to 30 somethings
Yes.
on how to do it the right way, even in the face of bad examples in our national, life evident through media.
Well, that is really powerful, sir, because just the title, I think most sailors should know this, but if they forgot from boot camp, at least those who went to any officer commissioning school, the title really comes from the famous law of the Navy, right? On the strength of one link of the cable dependeth the might of the chain. Why has that idea resonated with you throughout your career?
Well, the whole idea, going back to teamwork, is that we need to interlock with one another and find ways to actually come together to be able to handle the real tough challenges of our time. And so the word integrity, I know you want to go into that too, but really the might of the chain is supposed to convey the idea that we're going to need to come together and interlock in a way that creates the grand teaming that we'll need to handle the toughest challenges of our future. Whether you're talking about climate change, you're talking about the international environment, whether you're talking about techno-economic competition between superpowers, any of those things are going to require us to actually communicate, come together, and actually, weigh the facts and move forward and implement things that are designed to improve the collective good. Wow. And so the chain concept, the idea that one link, if it frays, it gets corrupted, it's rusty, it starts to have fissures. If that breaks, then you're going to be like a ship that tried to be at anchor, right? And it's just now drifting on, seas, and you can end up essentially, running aground if you're not careful. And so that's what I wanted to emphasize. Look, everyone needs to have a stainless steel link. You need to improve your own link. You need to figure out how you're going to interlock and reach out and actually connect your link with somebody else's, right? Yes. You're going to lengthen the chain. And then when you have long chains, you can actually do some really heavy lifting. You can't do heavy lifting if it's just shattered chains all over the place. And this is what we see in America today, shattered chains.
Wow. That is really powerful. I think it's a good segue into my next question. Talk about your own link, the link in proximity, and then what you can do as a long chain. I was going to ask, why did you organize your book around 3 powerful themes, which I ended up finishing last week? It's kind of like the first part, kind of like forging yourself, and then shaping your team, and finally transforming your world. Why those 3 themes, sir?
I think it's inside out, where you have to take a look at your own self, have the self-reflection, the honesty to evaluate yourself and where you can improve, and what you need to do, how you carry yourself in the world, how you interact with others in your circle of influence. We all need to be humble enough to, look hard at who we are, what we say and what we do online or in person or whatever. And then also to understand where you may need to self-strengthen, and how you're going to project your best self into the world. And that takes some dedicated effort, right? And so it's not just about academic study, it's the ethical study, right? It's the experiential learning that you do, all these other things. And so that comes first, right? You need to be ready to link up.
When you said that, sir, you mentioned that humility, even earlier when you said admitting what you do not know. It really takes a lot of humility to be a great leader, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And sometimes we self-deceive. We think we have arrived at truth. We have a monopoly on understanding actually what's going on and how we're going to, need to maneuver forward. And what I found is that those who are arrogant about their knowledge are usually going to lead us down really hazardous paths. Like you should be confident enough in what you know, but at the same time, all your apertures need to be open to all the additional things that you're going to need to know as a human to truly figure out how to deal with a very complex and fully adapting world that's moving all the time.
That is really powerful, because I've read a lot of books, especially non-fiction, about leadership, and many of them, they do emphasize competence a lot, right? You have to be competent, you have to get the job done. Yours places extraordinary emphasis on integrity. Why is that, sir?
Integrity, the subtitle, Forging Leaders of Iron Integrity.
Yes.
I love the word integrity because it has three meanings. The first meaning is that somebody of integrity tells the truth. The second meaning is that somebody with integrity operates from a moral basis, so with principles that guide kind of their actions. And the third element of integrity, you look it up in the dictionary or whatever, is that it's something that's in a state of wholeness. There's a unity, right? So the idea of those three meanings of integrity sort of impregnate the word and make it very, very powerful. And I like to say, look, if you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. Right.
Yes.
And so, that's a very strong thing. Integrity is rooted in character, and we can talk about character. And to me, we've lost it. The fact that we've lost our integrity, right, is evident to all of us. You can't find truth. It's hard to find truth, right? Everybody has alternative facts and whatever. We are disunited, and a lot of people are not operating from any kind of moral principles. If they are, in their view, moral, they're highly distorted and twisted. And so there are some common moral principles that have defined mankind for a long time. Those seem to be sort of haphazardly applied. And so in every way, we are suffering from a lack of integrity in our nation. And this is a problem that needs to be addressed with active measures. Good people doing the right thing and not just standing back and spectating.
Wow, doing the right thing even when it takes courage. Because in your book, so you have, I believe it's 46 chapter, starting out, shaping your team. 18 was delegating, and then the last theme, transforming your world, with play to strength, all the way down to farsightedness. Which one of those chapters was the most challenging for you to write?
I thought I had, because I'm an intel officer and I couldn't tell my best stories, and I didn't want to be negative on negative examples of leadership that I saw many times in my career. I didn't want to have a book that was, calling people out for some of their challenges that they experienced. And so I thought, man, maybe I've got like 10 or 20 stories in me, I don't know, that it can be unclassified. And so for me, it was easy enough to write some of the ones when I was growing up that I thought were salient, that would be good examples. But then what I figured out, BZ, was that I know lots of other people who are, fantastic leaders. Why don't I feature them? And that was key to unlocking it. And I enjoyed actually showcasing, my colleagues, those who had really demonstrated moral courage or the best example of a particular trait. And I love that, right? Making sure that I uplifted them as the model, the paragon of a particular virtue. And to me, I felt like this was appropriate for showing how to be inclusive with sharing kind of where the plaudits ought to go, but also telling their stories with their permission about some really significant things that they've done in their lives.
Well, that is really something. Actually, I kind of do something similar. Every week I have a friend in the spotlight. So this week it's Lieutenant General Mark Ertling. And by the way, I do it every Friday. So tonight, sir, that is going to be you for sure. And we do have, actually, I have one more question about the book. But before I do, we do have a question from the audience. And I believe This one is from my Sea Daddy, retired Captain Joe Rothschild. He's asking a question for Admiral Studeman. Since you are discussing integrity and values, how do you handle the situation in uniform when you have lost trust up your chain of command? How do you operate when your senior command does not align with your belief?
Yeah, this is very apropos. Thanks for going to the heart of what turns the guts of probably every leader out there that may be disgusted by the politics that swirl around them as they try to do their professional job, when they feel like I go into work and I'm part of that Borg. I'm part of a administration that does X, Y, and Z, and I don't want to have that label. I don't want to be party to do an X, kind of task that then suggest I support it when I privately don't. And I would say, look, good people need to stay in the lineup and do the right thing. And if it comes your way, there's a specific decision that you disagree with, you need to be able to articulate the pros and cons of it, why it's wrong. You need to have the moral courage to call out what may not be in the best interest of the United States or whatever. And look, if that doesn't work, I mean, you may blow the trust of people who want you to be political, want you to be loyal to one partisan group, right? Then you have to be willing to, move to a different job. And it may be a lateral out of that position. And that's, you're still in government service, but you're doing something else. Or, we always used to talk about what are the conditions on which you put your stars on the table.
Yes.
And there are thresholds, right? When you've been told to do something, may not just be unlawful, maybe illegal order, but something ethically from a moral basis that you strongly disagree with. And you have to be ready to sacrifice your career or your position to do that. And when you take a look at Admiral Halsey, for example, who was a Southcom commander, when he looked at what he was being told to do to kill people on Caribbean fast boats, right? He chose to say, no, I disagree with this. No matter what the lawyers say, because they can justify anything, I disagree. This has all the makings of extrajudicial killings. I don't think it's going to have the effect that this administration think it's going to have. And they're not listening to me anymore. I am now combat ineffective, and it's time to go. And he laid down 1, 2, 3, 4 stars. And said, I must depart the pattern. And you have to be willing to know what that threshold may be, or be prepared to actually think through, when you're faced with this, what your choice needs to be. You got to live with yourself. You got to look yourself in the mirror and say, I did the right thing.
That is quite a sacrifice, because the truth with Admiral Halsey, yes, he was a 4-star admiral, but because he didn't spend enough time as a 4-star, I believe he's going to retire as a vice admiral. And I'm sure a pension is not what he has in mind, but it's going to be a big difference in pay, in retirement. And why do you believe, sir, so few leaders are willing to do that? We're talking about integrity, we're talking about character. Like, as a sailor, since I joined the Navy almost 22 years ago, honor, courage, commitment has been drilled into my brain. It's who I am at my core. But why don't we see senior officers actually stand for what they think let me see. Why don't we see more and more senior officers stand for what they say they stand for in public?
Well, BZ, I do think you've seen some of that with some of the people that internally were trying to shape things, like, hey, just writing off women and Black people on promotion boards where they've already selected. And all of a sudden you have Army chiefs of staff or, other senior officers, fires. I do think internally the rationale is, look, I'm trying to shape this particular policy. I'm going to soften the edges. I'm going to try to orient it in the right way. I may not be able to adjust it fully or change anybody's mind, but if it weren't for me being here to get it kind of oriented and as legal or as ethical or as proper and appropriate as it needs to be, then in my absence, I could get just another lackey that comes behind me and just like rubber stamps everything and doesn't even try to soften the extremism that may exist on a particular mission task. And so I think people can take it too far. I think there are conditions under which maybe look, you're not, you probably need to bow out. But I think there are many that want to stay in the lineup and try to help the situation and mitigate the worst excesses that could be coming from above.
Yes. Thank you so much. So we only have about a dozen minutes left, and everybody listening, please make sure to get a copy of the book today. Might of a Chance is available everywhere books are sold. The last question I'm going to ask about the books here: if every listener right now could begin practicing just one principle for Might of a Chance tomorrow morning, which would you choose?
Well,
I think
the principle is I have a chapter on civility, but
Yes.
let's just take an extension of that. Let's go back to what is it that you need to do to project your best self to the world in the near distance, mid distance, and far distance, right? Your near circle of influence and then your far circle of influence. You know, what do you post online? What's your tone, right? How you say something is just as important as what you say. How do you contribute to a different environment, right? I always knew as a leader that climate was everything. Like when you first get in as a commanding officer, the most important thing is to ascertain your climate, not start to doing the to-do list in your inbox. It is, what is the climate going on? Are we in a virtuous cycle? Is there toxicity in the ranks? You know, what is the command dealing with? Is it going to be a transformational time? Is it stewardship? Like, how do I rate the climate and the stresses that are on people and whatever? And I go back to your personal responsibility as a citizen to how you contribute to your climate around you now really does matter. And when your climate is right, everything is easier. And when your climate is wrong, everything is harder. And so that to me is the most central thing. How do you project? What are you going to do? What kind of discipline are you going to apply to project the best kind of you into the world? Still there? BZ, I think I've lost you. BZ, I'm out here and not sure that I'm still connected into the podcast. Com check 1 2 3. Com check 1 2 3. Not hearing or seeing the host of the show. If I'm still online, you guys are listening to me. I'm checking my notes here to see if BZ is trying to get back in. Com check 1 2 3. Com check. Check check.
So she does have power then.
Yeah, she has power, but because she has Tesla.
Can she let us use her living room or her guest room so we can podcast and
Hey,
study?
again, we don't want to embark on
Just
this.
ask her. One time. Live.
Oh, there you are. All right, Mizi, can you hear me?
Maybe it's too slow. I only get like
Yes.
1,000.
Check.
Okay. So,
Check,
can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm very sorry. That was me. PG&E. We lost in our neighborhood, so I am using my phone to connect to the internet. All of my neighbors have lost power too, but we only had about 10 minutes left. Can you give us 10 more minutes, sir? Or do you have?
Yeah, no,
to
go ahead.
I usually never. Thank you so much, sir. Because what I'm going to do, I'm going to edit this part of the interview. So one thing that goes wrong when you do a live podcast, sometimes people lose power or something happens. There's nothing you can do about it. So thanks so much, sir, for going to stay for 10 more minutes as we end the show. I think I need to go to the very last segment. We wanted to talk a little bit about China. I think we need to talk about that before we are done today. So this is the last segment for today. China, Taiwan, and the great power competition. I know this really became a focus for us, information warfare, back in 2010. I believe October 2010, we became the information dominance core. I guess we found out we didn't dominate anything in the information domain, so we became the information warfare community. But Admiral, you have spent
Well, BZ, you froze again. You hooked up just before you asked the question.
Yeah.
Okay, so online, I think people can hear and see me, but BZ, I'm not sure anybody can hear or see you, or the flow is interrupted. Do you want to ask your question, chat?
Oh, sorry. So let me see. Maybe if I turn off my video. Okay. I wonder if you can hear me
I
better,
can.
sir. The question was, okay, you have studied China for decades now. What is something that most Americans just do not get about China's strategic objectives?
Yeah, they're implacable with regard to their desire to become the strongest pole in a multipolar world. And we have underestimated their will. An authoritarian government can set industrial policy. Xi Jinping has. He's made really bad policy choices, and the economy is a mess. So he's relying a lot on exports right now. But I guess the most important lesson to learn is that China's not a responsible stakeholder in the system. They are purposely reorienting the nature of the rules to be able to give room for them to essentially be preeminent. And even as they may suffer economically, maybe their GDP won't catch up to us anytime soon. They've invested in other forms of power in their comprehensive national power listing, including diplomatic power, informational power, military power, et cetera, and strong economic power with many countries of the world. We have talked about China, but we've had presidents that can't coherently describe why it all matters and what we need to do collectively to prepare for this Cold War-like environment. And that's what I would sort of share about China and what we are doing or not doing, or what we should know about it.
Now, So for those of us who are in the information warfare community or IC in general, it seems like we ourselves, America, is accelerating the rate at which China might become the number one superpower, based on some of the decisions we have made with our ally and some of the wars we have taken on that we really shouldn't have. I guess the question I have for you, sir, when do you expect there might be a conflict within the U.S. and China, just based on everything that is happening in the world right now?
I hope they can avoid it, but they're preparing for a war in every way. They're already conducting war against the United States. Is there a cyber war underway? Is there an information war underway? Is economic warfare part of daily life? Is lawfare happening? And the answer is this stuff is already underway, depending on how you want to define it. Are we going to get to a conventional military clash? I don't know. It depends on wise leaders. And I think we're in short supply of wise leaders about now. So I'm not sure where it goes. And one could argue that a weaker China, one that thinks that maybe its strongest days are behind them, Xi Jinping may conclude that he has to act to capture Taiwan in order to ensure that he has all of Taiwan's assets to be able to more fully compete in the world ahead. And so there is a case of there's too strong a China and what it means. Overconfident China that it starts to throw its weight around and more than just what you're saying. And then a weakening China and their self-perception about having to move out now, or maybe they won't ever have a better chance on Taiwan, for example. Those are like real concerns in the forks in the road that we could be seeing. And so the most dangerous path isn't just one path. There are actually multiple ways you get the most dangerous. Over.
Well, thank you, sir. And I'm sure you've read the most recent national security strategy, which for me, it looks more like a propaganda document than a serious national security strategy. And it looks like we are also, as a country now, pretty much not keeping eyes on the ball of China and being, I guess, I don't know how to say it, having other priorities. To me, again, with an intel eyes, it looks like we are not putting our priorities in order as a country the way we should, or the way we had been, at least in the last decade. Any comments you want to add on that subject, sir? What our national strategies has become and how we may not be really paying close attention to China like we used to?
Yeah, I mean, that NSS is essentially a screed. It's, people's emotions and partisan beliefs kind of showing up. Russia's not even called out. I mean, it's just, a glaring omission that we are taking a look at. It's almost upside down. Who's our friend and who's our enemy? And it seems to be completely flip-flopped. It's crazy. Look, I know that a lot of people have been working many years inside the U.S. national security community. Businesses are also helping, and there are other things that are underway to better protect American society. But it's almost despite our presidents in many ways rather than because of it. We've had presidents who have really not been leaders on this issue, have not chosen to put it at the core of what we need to talk to the nation about. And so people are confused about how much to do or who has to do it or how we're going to do it. Look, the military budget is, if you get 1.5 trillion or compromise 1.2, whatever ends up happening, that's totally a reflection of people inside the system understanding what the military dimensions of the problem are, because you're not buying that much military power for a Russia problem or an Iran problem. You're buying it for a China problem. So the evidence is there that people get it, but it's like our politicians can't be honest with the American people, like they can't trust them to know the truth. And this is what's getting in the way of a more coherent, policy approach that recognizes, in fact, that what we're dealing with is not even just China, even if it's the premier problem. You have the whole crank system of China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and all of their satellite countries that sort of within their orbit. That's the challenge. And I just think we have the wrong approach for the times. And I think we'll get limited gains, and we're losing a lot of years that we could have spent otherwise really preparing for the issues that we really need to contend with.
Thank you, sir. Two more questions, and we are going to be done with the podcast today. One about China is, I guess you've spoken about China blindness, right? What does that term mean, and why is it important, not just for the military and the IC community, but also for business leaders, not just the policy maker, to just better understand China's comprehensive approach to strategic competition?
Yeah, I gave a speech at West 3 or 4 years ago, and I described our China blindness kind of like being, people take a look at China, it's like they're blind and they're feeling parts of the elephant. And some people think, it's a tail, something think it's the leg, something I think is a wall because of the sides, something that people think it's a snake because of the trunk. And we need our political leadership to rip off the scales from our eyes, to show us the full dimension of the problem and show us the full elephant, how fast it's tromping around, what the dangers are, what we should or should not fear, what's malign versus benign, because they're benign elements, and how we're going to move forward collectively to deal with it and to make the case, to be persuasive, and to not have politics intervene. And maybe that's asking too much for our America right now, but that's what you need. I still think too many Americans, although they may understand parts of the China problem, don't really get it in its full spectrum danger that it actually is.
And so we can't really talk about China and great power competition without talking about Taiwan, right? Because Taiwan remains one of the world's most consequential geopolitical flashpoints. From a strategic perspective, what development should business leaders and citizens be watching over, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I hope we have like 5 to 10 years with Taiwan. I'm just not sure that things won't come to a head before that. I think we're facing something that's a crisis potential in single-digit years. Part of this, most of it, because of Xi Jinping's ambitions and how he's tied Taiwan to be essential to the rejuvenation of China. And I think he's going to get frustrated with, some pressure tactics that may not yield a political solution that he needs. So will he resolve that, as he gets full-on nuke power, they're still rapidly modernizing and they're still not done with the missile inventories and different types of capabilities they want, learning lessons from the Iran war and the Ukraine war. I think that the temptations will be stronger for Xi Jinping to trying to resolve this. It could be intensified pressure blockade, or it could be a full-on invasion or something else that's nibbling to kind of reset the conversation and the trajectory. But, this has the stuff of war in it. And if it's mishandled on both sides, then this is like world changing. It will define maybe which power will become, no kidding, the most significant superpower and the most influential on the planet. So there's a lot embedded in this, a lot of stakes here, and I hope we can manage it the right way.
Well, so one more question I want to ask about Taiwan. As you know, information warfare community, we have been focusing a lot on what would happen if China decide to take over Taiwan and how the US will defend them. And I know all of the exercises we have taken care of is outside in open source now, is really going to be a military confrontation. However, me personally, I do have a problem with that. And I have had some strong disagreement with some of my leadership in the information warfare community. And I'm going to try to explain where I think that comes from. Maybe I'm not looking at it the right way. But my understanding, sir, is we did have a historical defense treaty with Taiwan from 54 to 79, which we had to stop when we recognized Beijing, right? And then the US decided to have a Taiwan Relation Act of 1979. However, I did read that a couple of times. What it says about self-defense support is to mandate that the US provide Taiwan with arms of a defensive character. not boots on the ground and not blood. To me, the way I read it, it's kind of like what we're doing with Ukraine right now. We didn't send any American soldiers to die for Ukraine, but we give them a lot of money and a lot of weapons. As far as I can tell, there is absolutely no treaty. It's not like with NATO, for example, you attack one NATO country, all countries will go and fight, just like all of the NATO countries did for us after 9/11. So as far as I can tell, per our constitution, per our laws, there is absolutely no reason why American blood should be spilled for Taiwan. Maybe I am a little bit the United States of America's Navy, not the Taiwanese Navy, not the Iranian Navy, not the Israeli Navy, the Navy of the USA. I am here to support and protect the Constitution of the US against all of its enemies and also our allies, because as far as I can tell, we only have two reasons why you join the military, right? One is to kill our enemies, and two is to save our allies and friends. And Taiwan is not part of what I am obligated to. Again, maybe I am not looking at it the right way. Would you shed any insight or advice, wisdom on why a U.S. citizen who joined the U.S. military will potentially commit the ultimate sacrifice and give their life for a foreign country like Taiwan?
Look, this is a president's choice, and it depends on the circumstances that he or she faces. And that's the reason why we have strategic ambiguity, to buy deterrence, but without necessarily, committing ourselves in a way that would be something along what an alliance would require, Article 5 of NATO, for example. And so the idea is that the sheer thought that the U.S. is serious about potentially intervening will deny China the desire, the motivation to maybe go ahead and jump and try to resolve this through violence. And so that ambiguity may create the very, constraints that will lock out the potential for a major change to the status quo there. Like I'm with CSIS, and we're going to Japan and other places to write about why Taiwan matters. And we're going to take a look at a assimilated Taiwan through whatever means and say, did it matter? Why did it matter? And the fact of the matter is, the entire region is concerned about this. Japan is rearming and doing things that has never been seen since World War II because of the fear primarily over an ascendant China that's rapidly modernized, that will aggressively expand in the region. Philippines, every near and broad region or country is affected by this. Taiwan's a top 10 trading partner of the United States. It's like 9 or 10. They've made investments in the United States. They have the semiconductors and also electronics, which are key that we're still dependent on. And there's a whole idea of what it means for guarantees to our Western Pacific allies if we just let Taiwan go. It's consequential to them, and the issues bring in, like, will Japan or South Korea go nuclear? If they can't depend on the United States to deal with a partner challenge, a threat to a partner. So yeah, it's complicated. The choice is always going to be hard. A president will hopefully not have to make it. But the best way to ensure they don't have to make it is by looking like you're strong enough to be able to defeat any physical attempt to take over that island, because Taiwan's military alone can't present that sort of fear to the Chinese. You have to make it look like a high-risk gamble from now until eternity.
Wow. Thank you so much. So you've been extremely generous with your time. I usually don't spend an extra minute with a flag officer, but I am really, really grateful you've taken the time to talk to us and to my audience, sir. So the last question is, how can we add value back to you, sir?
Well, I think that the best value you can add is to go ahead and apply the golden rule to everyone around you, and to find another gear. You gotta be able to swallow a lot of crap these days, and to be able to stifle your immediate emotional response, which may be valid, but it may not be suitable for creating the conditions that we'll need in our country to move ahead collectively and progressively to get to a better spot. And so my message to you, if you want to do me a solid, is to be your most inspiring, positive, constructive self. Recognize the realities of what you're faced with, but find a way to channel it in a way that's constructive and productive and not toxic and destructive.
Wow, thank you so much, Admiral. And last question is, what does success mean to you today, sir?
Success, to me, it goes back to the Greeks when they talk about, what your life is all about and how to achieve happiness. And they say that, using all your talents in a life that gives them scope, right? So many people are so consumed with their profession that they may not have time to actually release all of their other talents that they have in life. And this sort of straitjacketing sort of builds up pressure like steam in a boiler. You have to find ways to use all your talents, which means kind of not forgetting your relationships, your hobbies, the things that you like to do, what you do in the community, etc. So success to me is trying to actually architect your life that allows you to give scope to all of your talents. Because if you're doing that and you are happy, you will bring the goodness into all of your interactions, and you'll help everybody to your left and to your right, and you'll be a positive force for the world.
Wow, that is really, really powerful. And this is truly the very last question.
Keep coming, Mizi.
It's great about the legend, the man, the myth, Admiral Mike Studeman, 50, 75 years from now. What do you hope they remember?
I didn't quite get everything that you said, but I hope that the legacy is that honorable, ethical, inspiring leadership based on character, strong character, is the only proven way to move ahead together for success. We have to relearn our lesson generation by generation. Sometimes we have to see the bankruptcy of ideas, the bankruptcy of the different approaches that people try to use to enact change. But at the end of the day, if you are departing from those tried and true lessons of leadership, then you probably weren't going to achieve your vision or your dreams. We just need to make sure that this is the echo that follows through future decades, so people don't have to actually learn the hard way what works and what doesn't.
Well, thanks a million, sir, and I really appreciate your time today. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Mizi. Great set of questions. I hope this is helpful to folks, and thanks for what you're doing to share some of the these high points with others as they make tough choices in their lives.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leadership and Success Podcast with your host, Coach BZ. If today's episode added value to your leadership journey, be sure to subscribe, share, and join us again for more wisdom nuggets on how to lead better and achieve greater success. Remember, leadership is the most critical skill of our time.